Hey guys, it's Friday the 6th of October, and I'm over a week now reading this book, Ideas Have Legs. I may have lost some of you along the way who just couldn't handle any more, but perhaps there are one or two diehards. And as I said from the beginning, I've started, so I'll finish. We are on to chapter 17, and I think there are 23 in total, so after tonight, 6 more. I think it's a nice chapter we're going to read tonight because it's all about the protagonist, Peter Howard, and his wife being very much the city slickers, but deciding to spend time. They bought a farm in Suffolk. They are total greenhorns when it comes to farming. And this bit is about, and again, keep in mind, it's just towards the end of the war. So they're setting out to set up a farm. They decide not just to set it up to earn money as such, but for the benefit of themselves and the community and overall the nation of England, with a view to spreading that kind of community thinking. Speaking of which, I'm just in from my own community tonight, well, out and about with my beloved wife. We were down in Sandymount Strand, which is like about 5-10 minutes from here. So what says you? Well, Sandymount Strand, for those of us, Sandymount Strand, for those of you that are into James Joyce, Ulysses, is the strand that Leopold Bloom courted his wife, Molly Bloom, on that strand. They went for little walkies there, I think, sometime during Ulysses. Don't know if you're interested or not, but anyway. It is very historic around here. We have a beautiful location. Anyway, shall we begin? Chapter 17. Let me see if I can dig it out for you guys. I'd love to hear from you, so if you can say hello in the comments, that would be great. If someone wants to buy me coffee, I'm going to leave my PayPal down there, but look, it's not about that. But it would be nice to hear from you, especially if you've been following it, if any of you have. Okay, chapter 17, Pen into Plough. I'm going to show you the book again. Oops. I won't bother putting up the little that you have been seeing. If you find, I won't bother putting it up on screen. I'm just too busy. Pen into Plough. Industry is in my breath, blood and bones. It is in my heart. Fleet Street and farming, the new and the old, the modern and the ancient of human craftsmanship and industry. My life is woven into the fabric of both. Some men have beaten their swords into ploughshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. I, for my part, exchanged my typewriter for a tractor. This is how it happened. The street of the Black Craft is either a graveyard or a granary for young men. They come a cropper there, or else they reap a crop. Luckily my sheaves were golden. With inky fingers greedily I harvested the grain. Then a crisis in my affairs arose. I decided to write a book setting out the truth about the Oxford Group. I asked permission from the Express to publish this book. The answer I got was one which the Express was legally entitled to make. Namely, that I could write a book on any other subject I chose, but not on the subject of the Oxford Group. If I wanted to write about that, I should have to leave the Express. It was a big decision to make, but there was that in me which said that publication of the truth about a great world movement was of more importance than the fate of one journalist, even a journalist so important to myself as me. So, with regret, I picked my hat off the peg and said au revoir to Fleet Street. I wrote and published my book. It is called Innocent Men. Its sales swiftly rose above 6 figures. It still sells steadily, 4 years after publication, in Britain and many other parts of the world, and I hope it will go on selling. I feel no sense of diffidence in recommending Innocent Men, for I take no royalties from it. Meanwhile, I was out of a job. I climbed into a railway carriage and travelled to Suffolk, for I meant to farm the land. Doe and I owned a ramshackle old farm. We had bought it in a fit of enthusiasm, and often afterwards thought it was a mad thing to have done. We had a romantic idea that the stream of money which for so long in Britain had poured from the land into the cities should be diverted back to the countryside again. We were earning plenty of money at that time. We had a deep-rooted and sincere love of the land, which probably sprang from generations of farming ancestors. Also, we had an idealized vision of ourselves at the age of 50, strolling retired and happy round our acres while the wind sent leisurely waves rolling across the cornland. The summer scents and sounds drowsily arose, and our men loaded the cloverly like fragrant tobacco into tumbrils. So we bought our farm. Much of it was in a tumble-down state. The hedges marched out across the headlands and were tall with years of neglected growth. The fields were hungry and in some cases starving. The land was hilly and awkward. The ditches were full and many of the drains blocked. But there was an atmosphere of vanished glory about the place, a glory which had disappeared from so many British farms and holdings during a get-rich-quick age, which despised and neglected agriculture, a glory which could be restored. The farmhouse had the shadow of old nobility about it, though many of the rooms were covered with layer upon layer of garish wallpaper, concealing the oaken beams beneath. The pinnacle of the barn roof towered up like a cathedral into the dimness, heavy with the memory of master crops from harvests long since garnered, and rich with the hope of huge, cool, yielding heaps of grain in years to come. The fields, thirsty for the hoof of cattle and the sweat of man, lay patterned to the rain and sunshine, expecting rich and fertile days. Our farmer friends told us that it would take 5 years before the place could be made to pay, but at that time my salary from the Express came rolling in. Doe and I did not see any reason why it should ever stop. Indeed, such an idea never occurred to us. So we bought the farm and expected to pay £1,000 a year on it for several years. Now suddenly, our whole circumstances had altered. My job and salary had vanished overnight. I knew a little of the theory, but next to nothing of the practice of farming. There is a big difference between a man in a highly paid job in Fleet Street, who owns a farm and has plenty of money to spend on it, and an ex-journalist with an old farm which is losing money fast, and which is the only means of livelihood for himself and his wife and children. As I travelled eastward, towards Suffolk, in the corner of my third-class carriage, I felt the prickle of fear. I was up against the timeless, ageless, endless problem of man, how to wrest a living from the stubborn womb of the earth. Would the land be my master or my servant? Would the old farm break me, or would I break it? I knew one of these two things had to happen. But coupled with these same fears was a feeling of exhilaration and resolve. Now it was hammer and tongs, back to the wall, neck or nothing. It was boots and all, with boats and bridges burned. I had a sense of pioneering, for I knew that when war was over, with the immense complications and upheavals of national economy which would inevitably follow, thousands of city dwellers and ex-servicemen would turn their minds and step towards the soil. If I, with my slick city mind, so unsuited to the age-old processes of nature, and with my soft city heart and hands, so bare before the rugged character of the land, could make a go of it, many would tread that trail with new confidence and hope. On our first evening, in our old farmhouse, Doe and I talked these things over together. We decided to farm for the country, not for ourselves. That is, not to treat the land as a kind of cash box and beat and bang the last penny out of it for ourselves, but to treat it as a national asset, to meet national need, to be stewarded and served and improved so that we should hand on to the future better than we had received from the past. We took to ourselves the old farmer saying, "Live as though you would die tonight, farm as though you would live forever." We decided that in every farm decision, as in every other decision of our lives, we would do our utmost to find God's will and to carry it through. So we sat late together, Doe and I, in the old farmhouse kitchen, which had weathered the storms of 400 winters, which had heard the tiny sounds of birth to usher in each new generation, and later had seen it die, which had sheltered the laughters and tragedies, the tears and dreams and voices of countless unknown yeomen of the past, our predecessors in the place, and would haven the hopes and fears of many more through the centuries after we, in turn, were forgotten. We knelt and prayed together. That first night in our old farmhouse, it was a habit we had lost in the clatter and drive of Fleet Street, but which seemed both natural and necessary in the quiet midnight of our farm bedroom at the beginning of our new adventure. So many romantic pictures of farm life a townsman has, white geese with a bare-armed, brown-skinned girl feeding them from a bowl, long lazy days with forks amid the shocks of corn, great log fires in the winter time with chestnuts on the hob, after a hot bath following the long day over root and stubble with a gun. But townsmen forget the other side of the ledger. Cold, wet, endless mornings when you strain your inside out, cranking a tractor as the pale dawn breaks, then doggedly sit for hours on end, bathed in the oil fumes and the damp mizzle which blows in from the North Sea. Days when the dust from the thrashing tackle inflames your eyes until they are red as a ferret's, while the sharp barley havels work their way through your clothing and grate the skin. Days of mud and fatigue, of sweat and chill and damp, many days of hardship and disappointment before the inevitable annual miracle of the harvest. Man's battle with the soil is endless. The very moment he ceases to grip and drive and master it, the land begins its silent, swift retreat back to the jungle. It is spiritual as well as physical warfare, for the earth is a living thing. It grapples with a man. Its resistance challenges the deep resilience and steadfastness of the human spirit. The old East Anglian farmers knew what they were saying with their proverb, "Break a field and make a man." So many memories of those early days of our farming. Adventure come crowding in upon me, and most of them are of dough. She had lived all her life in cities. Her clothes and hats often came from Paris, which was the European capital she knew best. Her hair was curled and cosseted, her nails a delicate and almost human shade of pink. She dreaded life in the country. She was afraid it would turn her into a vegetable. This made her clear conviction about the rightness of our decision with the Express even more compelling. Life on the farm drew forth from its scabbard where Fleet Street life had laid it, all the shining, unconquerable steel of Dough's spirit. I see her now, sweat dripping off her brow onto the baking summer earth, hoeing, 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 until the time came for her to prepare the evening meal. I see her in the old mackintosh, with a sack tied round her head and shoulders, her body bent forward like an arrow against the horizontal December rain, rescuing hens from swamped hen coops and bringing home a handful of eggs triumphantly for our winter meal. I see her standing upright with one hand rubbing her aching back and the other sweeping away the hair which had fallen into her eyes. She had been chopping and laying hedges, blackthorn, elm, and crab, which for 25 years had felt no slashes upon them. Before her, on the iron-heart, frosty winter earth, a huge fire burns up the branches of the hedge. The ash of the fire has blackened her face, except where the sweat makes white patterns from her forehead to her chin, and where her eyes, full of laughter, shine out. Best I remember her in the evenings, when the day's work was done, when new difficulties had to be faced and planned, when sometimes it seemed hard to continue, to know whether we should pull through, when the temptation was to sell the place at a profit, which we could have done, and to get clear. Dough never faltered. She saw steady, cool, and straight from the beginning. She had the dauntlessness of heart and the confidence in God which makes it hard for others to keep secret their fears or to maintain them. Today, Dough's hands are chipped, chapped, and stained. Yet they are lovelier to me than in the days of expensive and fragrant manicures in the West End of London. Lovelier in the sense of more to be beloved, for they are the hands of a mature spirit which has stood full stature through the grey days. She has fought and triumphed in the battle of adversity. Day by day, week by week, month by month, we planned, toiled, and sweated. So many mistakes we made, but we wasted none of them. We learned from each one. We hacked the hedges and dug out the drains and ditches. We smashed down the stubborn pan of earth with steam ploughs and deep cultivators. Patiently we plodded behind the horses as their massive limbs pounded the soil like pistons, their breasts cleaving the frosty air before them. We bought cattle, and last thing at night travelled with lanterns round the darkling yards, feeling the warm breathing of the beasts upon us, and hearing the age-old rustling as they plunged knee-deep in the straw. We hacked and hoed and harvested. As the huge roots thudded into the bottom of the tumbrils in the autumn with a sound of thunder, we felt the reluctant earth slowly, stubbornly begin to budge before our efforts. Suffolk has the sense of eternal values about it. It is part of the great invasion belt of British history. Romans, Normans, Dutch, all these and many more have swept over East Anglia and left traces of habit and language behind them. As the plough breaks the soil there, it may turn up flint weapons, coins, pottery, skulls, and bones. Sometimes a whole Viking ship is dug up. It was dragged inshore and buried with honour and feasting centuries ago after its days of pirating and adventure were ended. Our village was a centre of the wool trade in Edward III's reign, and our house and barn are built of timbers from a ship which sailed the seas in the days of John Cabot and the 7th Henry. Perhaps it was one of the little ships which repulsed the Armada under Drake. Down the road in our valley, Cromwell marched with his Ironsides, the russet-coated, round-headed East Anglian yeomen who farmed these fields, and it was from these counties that the Pilgrim Fathers gathered to sail out in the Mayflower to a new world. In Suffolk, they talk a sing-song, delightful dialect which Doe and I found hard to understand when first we went there. Bardsnazun is Suffolk for bird nesting. Meeson means mice, and a forelay is a crossroad. They call an awkward girl a slamacan, and a horny pie is a curlew. I was astonished when, soon after we bought the farm, a villager said to me, "Master, do you let I make a titter-ma-tatter for your boy?" He meant to ask if he could build a seesaw for my son Philip. Another one described a local tradesman to me as a stingy article, by which he meant an ill-tempered, queer customer. 2 days after Christmas, I and one of my men took 60 rabbits to market. The dealer who bought them had enjoyed his breakfast, and it had plainly been of the liquid variety. My farm man wrinkled up his nose at the strong beery smell which surrounded the dealer. As we turned away, he clutched my arm in great excitement and cried, "Do ye get that, master? Cor, he a pung like an old ferret, he do." Don, Doe, and I had been told that we should be treated by the Suffolk folk as foreigners and strangers. Instead, we found welcome and warmth. For the Suffolk farmers and villagers, when they discovered that Doe and I were aware of our own shortcomings as agriculturalists and were eager to learn, took us to their hearts and invited us into their homes. They made available for us a wealth of experience and instinct and wisdom which only uninterrupted generations upon the soil can supply. Our farm men gave us a friendship and loyalty which warmed our hearts. Our neighbours offered us advice when we asked for it, help when we needed it. When our barn was empty of food for stock in the first lean years, they sent us sacks of supplies. When we needed implements, they lent them, and often supplied men to drive them too. Ungrudgingly and with a generous spirit, they helped us onward in our attack upon the soil. In return, we were able to offer them the new spirit of our own home and lives, and a fresh philosophy for British agriculture, that it may be part of the destiny of the country folk of Britain to fill the hearts of the nation with new faith and fire, as well as to fill larders with food. Sorry folks, just a little pause here. There could be a delay or a lag in the picture and audio. Hopefully the audio won't be affected. Okay, it's not too bad. Right, the government was appealing for farmers to employ women labour, so we took on and trained 8 land girls. They live in the farmhouse with us. One used to be a cutter in a London store, another was a cook, another used to work in an office as secretary, and one used to appear on the stage. So many people, with differing ages, tastes, backgrounds and temperaments. It offered a first-rate chance of learning to live together and like it, the secret which men and nations have forgotten. A depth of unity, understanding and appreciation grew steadily among us, by change, not by chance, as together we battled to make the spirit of the new Britain we were fighting for come to birth in our own house. We began to hammer out together a 5-point farm philosophy to meet the needs of the age. Here it is. 1. What can I do for this land of England? Not, what can this land of England do for me? 2. Grow character as well as crops. We try to make each other better people as we work together to make a better farm. We found that living to make the other fellow great as you work alongside him holds the secret of teamwork and of happiness, and answers the bitterness of industry. The land calls for qualities of endurance. It has no use for those who quail before difficult situations and difficult people. It demands the stickability and faith we need if we are to preserve and extend our heritage. 3. Democracy works when God is the boss. We decided that every big decision, whether about farm or household policy, should be taken unitedly in the heart of the family on the basis of discovering what was right, rather than who was right. Often one of the land girls would be given the distinctive idea which saved time and money, or which developed new advances of character for the family. 4. When God guides, He provides. We have put to the test and proved the age-old truth that those who are willing to go to God for orders are always given the material things, manpower, time and money, necessary to obey them. 5. If you put your heart into your work, you find it puts heart into you. There is much hard and unpleasant work connected with the land. We have found that it is not what we are doing or how much we are getting out of it, or where we are working, which makes us happy on a job. We are happy at any job if we give our best to it, and discontented if we do not. Today, our farm men and their families, as well as farmers and workers of surrounding farms, are with us on this program. There is an old story of the hermit who discovers the secret of happiness, and though he lived in the remotest forest of the uttermost country in Asia, the world carved a highway to his door. When Doe and I bought our Suffolk farm, we chose the spot partly because it was so remote. We wanted to get away from people. In the last 3 years, over 1,000 people from every part of Britain have visited us at our farm. During the last 12 months alone, over 400 names appear in our visitors' book. they do not include the scores of folk who drop in just for a meal or for the day. We have our guests sleeping in tents and the barn during the summer. One man wrote to me, "Your home, which began as a country retreat, has become a national advance." Members of Parliament, servicemen, miners, dockers, industrialists, trade unionists, parents and children, Americans, Australians, Canadians, editors, the high and the low, the rich and the poor, all pass through our doorway, and many take something new away with them as they go. Each year we hold a Horky. Horkies are hundreds of years old. They are the celebration which in old days farmers and men with their families held in their barns each year. All broke bread and thanked God together for the harvest. From East Anglia the Pilgrim Fathers gathered to sail. In 1620 they made their landfall in the west. In 1621 their first harvest was safely in, and with memories of the barns and villages of East Anglia now forever left behind them, they held a Horky. So Thanksgiving began, and while in America this festival of family and earth has been maintained and enriched, in England we have let it die out. We hold our Horky in the barn. Its oak beams and rafters have that dark silver glow, merging into gold when the shadows fall. In the bays are tons of beans and oats, shot in great heaps on the floor, food for the cattle in the months ahead. The walls are decorated with red berries, leaves, huge sheaves, globed golden mangolds, and long tapering sugar beet, white against the oak, with its vivid green foliage, like parted tresses above it. At long trestle tables sit our guests, 160 this year, American soldiers, government officials, trade unionists, newspaper men, folk of every kind from many parts of Britain, and our farmer friends, farm workers, land girls, thatcher, blacksmith, and harvest hands. The atmosphere of harvest seems to give everybody an appetite. Home-cured ham, bread, fattened, killed and cured on the farm, mashed potatoes, salad, apple fool, and rolls go fast down the red lane. Iced fruit cup, cream cheese and scarlet apples fill in the crannies. Then there are songs, recitations and speeches. Most years the local blacksmith gives us a recitation, and our horsemen play a trombone solo. At our last Horky, our Member of Parliament said, "If the spirit and teamwork of this farm, as I have seen it, can spread throughout the nation, and it is doing so, it can solve every problem of the strenuous days ahead. It can be done, it should be done, and it must be done. I promise you tonight to work to make it so in this constituency and at Westminster." But the tribute which perhaps gave greatest joy to our land workers and ourselves came from an old man of 86 who walks slowly up and down the only level stretch of road in our neighbourhood, because it tires him overmuch to walk uphill. 78 years ago he began to work as a boy at Hill Farm. The farmer then was the famous Sam Hustler, who was known far and wide for his success in mastering the soil. This old chap said to one of my employees, "When Mr. Howard came to the farm, nobody thought he'd do no good there. It was a poor old place, and awkward to farm. It was badly let go, but I watched he, so I did, and soon I says, 'There's another Sammy Hustler up there.'" They all laughed at me, but it was true, sure enough. Look at your crops today. Certainly, The old farm has responded generously to what we have done together. In the last 3 harvests, our number of stacks has risen from 9 to 23, and in the interval we have bought an elevator which builds bigger stacks today than we did at first. We grew a year's sugar ration for 3,600 people last year, most of it off-land, which had been written off as useless. We were told, "Don't sow anything there, you won't even get your seed back." There were no hens or cows when we arrived. Last year we produced 14,000 eggs. We have a growing herd of TT cattle. Last year we produced 13,000 gallons of milk for the nation. When first we came to the farm, Doe and I and our land workers wrote a poem giving our vision of what we saw for the farm. Part of the poem ran like this. "Now under God, we guardians of the soil, dedicate all we have in toil and prayer, not for the swift return in cash and kind, but recreating craft in husbandry and stewardship and quiet sufficiency. So both our cottages and farms shall know the multitudinous fruitage of the soil. The barns shall sag and tremble with the corn, beam high, rich pyramids of warmth and gold. Broad stallions, thunderous hooved, shall pace the earth, and fertilize the pastures, while the cows wax fat and richly yield in calf and cream. Huge hogs shall grunt and snore away their time, while bees garner the honey murmurously. We, stewards of the hill, plan under God to shape this farm to perfect purposes, perfect in every detail, so to mould this message to the nation and the world. Our vision is now on the way to becoming true, but it is not through anything we of ourselves have done. Instead, we are people who began with small agricultural knowledge and with no idea of how to work out an answer to the needs of the age. Yet it is a fact, proved by daily renewed experience, that God does guide all those who listen to him and acts when they obey. This is the basis of our living at the farm, and the years have proved that it stands the test. Won't you take care of yourself? Good people are scarce. Look after yourselves. Love to hear from you in the comments below. But if you're too tired, too drowsy, that's okay. Sorry about the lag in the camera. I think the studio just heats up and these PCs heat up sometimes, and I couldn't be bothered turning on a fan tonight. There is one in the background somewhere. Then again, you wouldn't be able to hear me if I put the fan on, would you? Good night.